All right, let's settle a classic debate. One that you hear behind pretty much every bar. When it comes to vodka, does the base really matter? We're talking grain versus potato. Let's get into it. Okay, so in our last explainer, we really hammered home this point. Vodka's whole deal is neutrality, right? By law, by tradition, it's supposed to be the super clean, unflavored spirit with as little character as possible. And that brings up a really important question for anyone working in a bar. If the whole point is to be a blank canvas, then how much can the material of that canvas, whether it's made from grain or potato, truly change the final picture, especially once it's in a cocktail? That's the puzzle we're going to solve today.
And to do that, we've got to go right back to the beginning, back to production. Because that journey from a simple starch into a spirit is exactly where those first tiny differences start to show up.
So here's the thing. Pretty much every spirit you can think of starts with some kind of plant starch. But here's the catch. Yeast, which does all the heavy lifting for fermentation, can't actually eat starch. So producers have to use enzymes to break that starch down into simple, fermentable sugars. This part of the process, it's the same for everyone. Doesn't matter if you're making whiskey from barley or, you guessed it, vodka from potatoes.
And this really just drives home the point that all spirits, at their heart, come from a farm. They have this shared agricultural beginning. But that very first choice, the plant itself, whether it's an apple for Calvados or a grain or a potato for vodka, that single decision sets the entire stage for everything else that's going to happen.
Okay, and here is where things start to diverge. This is the first big difference. Both grains and potatoes are packed with starch, obviously, but how you get to that starch is a different story. With potatoes, you have to cook them down, and that can create this really heavy, almost creamy mash. Greens get cooked too, but they often result in a much lighter base to start with. And that initial texture, that can absolutely have a subtle influence on the final spirit, way before a drop of it even sees a still. So naturally, these little differences in production have led to some really big myths that have stuck around in the industry for years. It's time we bust them. Let's separate the marketing speak from what you actually feel in your mouth. Come on, you've heard this a million times, right? It's the classic line, oh, it's a potato vodka, so it's inherently smoother. It's used as this key selling point, making it sound like just using potatoes automatically gives you this super silky top-shelf product. But is that really how it works? The short answer? Nope, not at all. The reality is way more about the technical side of things. That smoothness everyone talks about, it comes from how well the spirit is distilled and filtered, not what it's made from. I mean, you can have a terribly made potato vodka that's super harsh, and you can have a green vodka that's been so meticulously crafted it feels like silk on your tongue. The raw material gives you potential, for sure, but it's the purification, the craft that defines the final product.
And then there's the other side of the coin, the myth that all grain vodkas are the same, that they're all just light and crisp. And, well, that's just way too simple. It completely misses the bigger picture.
The nuance here is everything. Just think about whiskey for a second. You know that a soft, wheated bourbon tastes completely different from a bold, spicy rye, right? Well, that exact same logic applies here. A vodka made from rye can have a real weight to it, a peppery character that just shatters that whole light and crisp stereotype. Okay, so let's bring this back to the real world. Let's get practical. When can you, or more importantly, when can your guests actually taste these subtle little differences in texture and weight? Because let's be honest, in the middle of a crazy Saturday service, that's the only question that really matters. The answer is in your most spirit-forward drinks. We're talking about the classics, the martini, the Vesper, the Gibson, any cocktail where the vodka isn't just an ingredient, it's the absolute star of the show. That's where those little textural notes, that hint of creaminess you might get from a potato base or that crispness from a wheat base can actually come through and make a real difference. This chart really lays it all out, and it's a great way to think about it for your own bar program. So up top, you've got those spirit-forward cocktails. Here, the impact of the base is high. Then you move to the middle, to your citrus-heavy drinks and sours, like a Cosmopolitan. Here, the impact is moderate. You might still get a little bit of that texture, but it's fighting for attention with all that citrus. And then, at the very bottom, you have your mixer-heavy drinks, your highballs. At this point, the impact from the base ingredient is basically low to non-existent. I mean, just think about it for a second. The second you pour in that spicy, powerful ginger beer for a Moscow Mule, or all those complex, savory ingredients for a Bloody Mary, any of those delicate little nuances from the vodka base, they're gone, just completely buried. At that point, the choice of potato versus grain is, for all practical purposes, totally irrelevant. So this is really a question for you and your bar program. Are you making these choices with intention? Are you consciously grabbing a potato-based vodka for your martinis and then using a solid grain-based workhorse for your highballs? Or is your choice just based on old habits or maybe what the marketing tells you? It's definitely something to think about. So, as we're seeing, the base ingredient is really just the first chapter in the vodka story. It's not the whole book. It's a super important starting point for sure, but it absolutely does not define the final destination.
What choosing between grain or potato does is it sets the potential. It gives the distiller a certain kind of raw material, a specific kind of canvas to start painting on. So, that begs the question, right? If the base material isn't the whole story, then what is? What are the factors that have a much bigger impact on the final quality, the character, and that elusive smoothness that everybody wants? Well, that's exactly what we're going to get into in our next explainer. We are going to do a deep dive into the really critical stuff, distillation and filtration. We'll talk about the number of times it's distilled, the type of still being used, the different materials used for filtering, all the technical details that truly craft the final spirit you're pouring for your guests every single night.
But until then, I really want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Have you ever done a side-by-side blind tasting of a potato versus a green vodka? And be honest, could you consistently tell which was which? Your experience out in the field is what this is all about. Thanks for watching.